Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I. Gilbert just started barking. Someone knocked on the door, probably the mailman, knocked on the door just as I went on. Now they're barking and screaming. And it wouldn't be a Robservations show if there wasn't someone at the door, right? Well, you know what happens? You know what I do whenever I go on live and someone's at the door and the dogs are barking? I offer them cookies. That's what I do. Come on, boys and girls. I got cookies. Come on. You want those cookies? Gilbert, Tallulah, come get a cookie. You know you want a cookie. Yes, you do. It's the 250th show of Robservations today. It is an amazing show, and I couldn't not have Gilbert and Tallulah getting her cookies too, because everybody wants their cookies, right? Gilbert does. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this is Robservations, the show about something, brought to you by, as we all know, Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com and you punch in PGS for this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, you can get 20% off your order. What an amazing, boy, these dogs must have known that this is the 250th episode of Robservations, the show about something. I'm your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. Welcome back, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. I can't believe I've done 250 shows. I can't believe you're still listening to me do these shows, but I really appreciate the fact that you're a very loyal audience, and I'm still enjoying myself. I hope you are too. And you know, there's all kinds. I mean, we got the Watchmen series about to drop. Who would have ever thought there'd be a Watchmen TV series? Although I think a lot of people would have, thinking that's the way to go. Like HBO should have done it after Terry Gilliam did not make his version of the Watchmen. Everyone's like, well, you know, you should do it HBO. Yes, HBO should do it. That's the way it should have gone, perhaps. And now it is going that way. And boy, Damon Lindelof has written what he's calling a sequel to the comic book itself. Which brings me, you know, I want to talk about writing for a minute. I want to talk about franchise property writing. And as everyone knows, I rail about Star Trek all the time. And so why not give you a little bit of a rail? The latest short trek, the latest two short treks, actually. So Michael Chabon, who wrote Q&A, which was the first short trek of this new Discovery season, was basically an episode that infantilized Spock, made him essentially dumb. And he needs to be taught a lesson by number one as they wait in the turbo shaft. There's something weird that's happening across our franchises, venerable franchises that have been around for a long time, where characters like Spock, I don't know why these writers feel the need to take these legacy characters and go back and rewrite them to make them basically dumb, that they need to learn something from these new characters. Now, people will say, but number one and Spock were both introduced in the cage. Well, yes, but here's the thing. The entire episode was based around what would be called now a production mistake. When they were first making Star Trek, they talked about how, okay, number one, Spock in the first pilot, The Cage, obviously famously rejected by the network. So what you're doing now is you're now taking a pilot that was rejected by the network that was very cleverly used in the first season of Star Trek, probably the most clever thing ever. It was used in the Menagerie, of course, the only two-part episode of the original series. But the fact is, now that the writers are fixating on the fact that there's a basically what would be called a production mistake, because the show, the Menagerie, The Cage, was different than the final version of what Star Trek became. But now, I mean, it was cool that we had the Menagerie. But when people said, you know, Spock smiled in that episode, so Spock didn't smile later on the show, so let's make a whole episode about that. Or, you know what? They combined the characters. There's Gilbert stealing, I think he just took a baguette. Which would be kind of funny. So let's well, number one was written out of the show, and Spock became both the first officer and the science officer. So let's go back and not only base episodes on how characters are portrayed in a failed pilot. Let's go back and make Spock, when he came on board the Enterprise, basically like a babe in the woods, as if a Vulcan wasn't already intelligent, as if he already didn't go through Starfleet Academy. It's very odd, and it seems to me to be incredibly lazy writing. But I'm not going to make this about Discovery. What I wanted to make this about is it's the 250th show of Robservations. So let's celebrate some greatness. And I wanted to celebrate some greatness because of an announcement about the Cassian Andor series. Everybody's bagging on Star Wars all the time. I mean, my God, if the history of humanity is written, people are going to go back and go, I don't know what it was about Star Wars during 2018 and 2019 that got people in this social media space so riled up. But for all the talk, I have been a staunch defender of Kathleen Kennedy, and I will continue to be a staunch defender of Kathleen Kennedy. And I think if you want to look to the real state of Star Wars, that what's happening as far as Star Wars is concerned, we have to look to Disney Plus. Disney Plus is, look, I understand Rise of Skywalker is coming out, but my whole thing about the Rise of Skywalker is that you've basically you have somebody who is they're wrapping up a trilogy series, a 3 trilogy series, not with the original creator involved. So the man who did 6 of those films, who oversaw 6 of those films, and it was his idea, is really not participating in the 3rd trilogy. So I can't necessarily consider it to be some kind of definitive look at Star Wars. It's a continuation based on corporate necessity. But I do think that The Mandalorian, the upcoming Obi-Wan series, and now the Cassian Andor series, which has just leapt to the top of my excitement level, is where we should be looking for new Star Wars. Because again, the idea of The Mandalorian is auteurist. You have Jon Favreau, who is one of Disney's most important directors, obviously started the MCU with Iron Man, really laid the groundwork for everything we have now. He has, of course, done Jungle Book and Lion King, pioneering brand new technologies, bringing everything he's learned to bear on The Mandalorian show, which is actually now being utilized for reshoots for Rise of Skywalker. Yes, this late in the game. But what's amazing is for television, because they don't have the kind of budgets that a feature film has, they can take more risks. Also, the new technology that they're developing for The Mandalorian, which is based on technology that they've already used in Lion King. It's technology that Jon Favreau has been at the forefront of, so he really knows how to use it. They've brought that to bear on The Mandalorian to give it a feature film look without having to spend feature film money. So I'm really excited about where we're going with Star Wars when it comes to Disney Plus. And of course, The Mandalorian drops in less than a month. We're getting 8 hours of Star Wars, which is more than the original trilogy. 8 hours of brand new Star Wars with new characters, places we've never seen before. I don't know about you, but I'm very, very excited. The directors they have working on, the actors, I mean, it looks to be first rate across the board. I'm very excited. And yesterday, Joe Otterson in Variety. Actually, no, it's today, believe it or not. It wasn't yesterday. It is. Oh, no, it was yesterday. Yesterday on the 15th. Variety exclusively announced that Rogue One writer Tony Gilroy joins the Cassian Andor Star Wars series at Disney Plus. Now, this is very exciting to me because any motion picture or television series lives or dies with the writing. You have to have great writers, and to have a show like Cassian Andor, you're dealing with spies, you're dealing with the rebellion. You need a writer that really understands what the heck is going on. Tony Gilroy, obviously involved with Rogue One. He was able to help put that project together when it was sort of falling apart at the seams. And Tony Gilroy, funny enough, his first credit is The Cutting Edge. Yes, The Cutting Edge, the skating movie. That's what he wrote. But Tony Gilroy also wrote the Stephen King adaptation Dolores Claiborne. That is actually quite excellent. He wrote The Devil's Advocate, directed by, well, another Taylor Hackford movie that I really, really liked. He gets credited for an adaptation of Armageddon, believe it or not. I mean, I'm always going to say that's a guilty pleasure. Proof of Life, but he wrote The Bourne Identity, The Bourne Supremacy, and The Bourne Ultimatum. He wrote Michael Clayton. He wrote Duplicity, State of Play. He even wrote The Bourne Legacy. And yes, he wrote The Great Wall, the Matt Damon movie. I know. But still, the man is a great writer. He also is a producer, produced Nightcrawler. His brother, of course, is the other half of that. Tony Gilroy is a great writer, and he's exactly the kind of writer. He's a feature writer they're bringing over for the Cassian Andor series. And I am very excited about this. I think along with The Mandalorian, and assuming, of course, the Obi-Wan series is great, we're going to be getting 3 amazing Star Wars shows. I think The Mandalorian is going to be amazing. You know, if I had to go all in, if I was a betting man, I would say The Mandalorian is where it's at. I think we're going to get something really special with that. And with the addition of Tony Gilroy he's going to write and direct episodes of I can't even speak. And he's going to write and direct episodes of the Cassian Andor series. And remember, he directed Michael Clayton, and he directed The Bourne Legacy, and he directed Duplicity. And I think it's an amazing coup to get this kind of talent to work on the Cassian Andor series. The planned Disney Plus series centered on, this is what Variety stated, the planned Disney Plus series centered on Rogue One character Cassian Andor is bringing in the film's co-writer Tony Gilroy, Variety has learned exclusively. Gilroy is set to write the pilot for the series in addition to directing multiple episodes. He will work alongside Stephen Schiff, who remains on board as showrunner. No official premiere date has been set, but Disney has previously indicated the show would debut in 2021. The untitled show focuses on Rebel Agent Andor prior to the events of Rogue One in the early days of the rebellion against the Empire. The show has been described as a spy thriller when plans for it were first revealed last year. And it was also previously announced that Diego Luna would return as Andor, while Alan Tudyk is set to reprise his role as K2SO, Andor's droid sidekick. In addition to his work on Rogue One, Gilroy's other screenwriting credits include the Jason Bourne film franchise, as well as films like Michael Clayton, The Devil's Advocate, and Dolores Claiborne. He also directed Michael Clayton, for which he earned Oscar nominations for both Best Original Screenplay and Best Director. I love Michael Clayton. We have somebody of this caliber, a filmmaker of this caliber, working on the Cassian Andor series. Amazing. Gilroy also directed 2012's The Bourne Legacy. He was originally an uncredited writer on Rogue One, but earned a screenwriting credit when he was brought on to handle extensive reshoots on the film. He is also said to have worked closely with director Gareth Edwards to supervise the edit once reshoots were completed. This was not the first time he also worked with Gareth Edwards. He worked with Gareth Edwards previously on Godzilla. Rogue One was the first live-action standalone Star Wars film outside of the 3 existing trilogies. The film followed the team of rebel spies who stole the plans for the Death Star, leading to the events of Star Wars: A New Hope. It was released in 2016 and went on to gross over $1 billion worldwide. Disney Plus is set to launch on November 12th. Among the titles that will be available at launch is The Mandalorian, a live-action Star Wars series that hails from Jon Favreau, starring Pedro Pascal in the title role. Ewan McGregor also recently confirmed. Is he in the title role, though? Is he? A live-action Star Wars series that hails from Jon Favreau, starring Pedro Pascal in the title role. Ewan McGregor also recently confirmed he will reprise the role of Obi-Wan Kenobi in a limited series that is scheduled to shoot next year. Other big-ticket shows in the works at Disney Plus include multiple limited series based on characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe like Loki, Hawkeye, and Scarlet Witch and Vision. This is a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal to have an Oscar-caliber filmmaker come on board to do a Disney Plus series, and this is the kind of talent that they're attracting. I'm very excited for this. I hope Star Wars fans give Kathleen Kennedy the credit she deserves for putting things like this together. I mean, you can't, if you're going to pillory her online for being mad about stuff that she does that you don't like, you certainly have to then laud her for doing things that you do like. I think The Mandalorian is going to prove to be quite delightful for everybody involved, this old school Star Wars fan in particular. And I do think having a Cassian Andor series and bringing Ewan McGregor back for an Obi-Wan limited series, supposedly 4 episodes, is an incredible thing to be doing. So kudos to Kathleen Kennedy for doing all of this. It is very exciting. And, you know, for the 250th show of Robservations, which, by the way, again, I can't thank you guys enough for being here. It's been 250 shows. Amazing. I wanted to do something I'm excited about. You know, I love Star Wars. I've always loved Star Wars. I have countless Star Wars reference books. I have so many Star Wars models. I've owned every Star Wars action figure. And then, of course, I moved over. I did what I did with Star Wars figures. The same thing I did in 85 when I got a CLD 900, a Pioneer CLD combi player, the first combi player. In 85, I got rid of all my videotapes. I had thousands of movies on videotape, on VHS. I was like, enough of this garbage. I just got rid of it all and started buying Laserdiscs. Well, I did the same thing when in the late 90s when they started making 12-inch Star Wars figures again. I got rid of all my 3 3/4-inch figures. Probably stupid. I had a little blue snaggletooth. You know, I sold them all. I didn't do bad. I didn't do bad when I got rid of them, but I moved over to 6-scale figures entirely, and I honestly don't regret the decision. And then, of course, Sideshow, and then Hot Toys now has the Star Wars license, and I will be trying to fulfill my collection for the rest of my life. But anyway, I'm a lifelong Star Wars fan, and it gives me no pleasure to not like Star Wars movies. And you know, as I've said, I thought the Star Wars prequels were bad movies, but good Star Wars. There's a lot in there, and I enjoy scenes. One day I'll have to do my own cut of the Star Wars prequels into one mega cut of all the stuff that I like. So I'm excited. I'm actually excited. I'm very excited for Star Wars on Disney Plus. I think we're getting some great stuff, and I'm very, very excited. And I think they know a Cassian Andor series, it's a spy thriller. It's an espionage story set in the Star Wars universe, and who better than to get Tony Gilroy? If you haven't seen Michael Clayton, what a terrific movie that is, and he directed it. Fantastic performances. I think what he's going to do is, you know, a lot of people over the last couple days have been talking about how Star Wars was always made. It was always made for kids, and how it because of the Freddie Prinze Jr. rant I covered on this show, like, you know, Star Wars was meant for children. No, it was not. The people that were making Star Wars back in the 70s, including George Lucas, but I am convinced as much as George Lucas did create all of this, he also doesn't quite have a handle on it because he needed his collaborators to finish Star Wars. So the sensibilities of Star Wars, even though George directed it, began with him. You cannot discount Gary Kurtz. You cannot discount Marshall Lucas, Richard Chew, Paul Hirsch, the people that edited the film, the cinematographer, all the special effects technicians. A lot of people contributed to the success of Star Wars. And I think that everybody working on it was trying to make a timeless fable for everyone. It was not a movie that was directed just toward children. 20th Century Fox never felt that way, I'll tell you that, when they agreed to finance it. So this idea now, especially in the wake of the Freddie Prinze Jr. Star Wars rant, even though he said, oh, it was always for kids. I know George Lucas always must have thought it was mainly directed toward children, but certainly Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back are not necessarily children's movies like the original Star Trek. I, as a young man, I was much younger when I first saw Star Trek. I loved Star Trek at 5 and 6 years old. I loved Star Wars at 10, but I always thought of both of those franchises as, look, Star Wars had Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, people I wanted to grow up to possibly be. I didn't like when they went back, when George Lucas puts young Anakin in a movie at 9 years old. I know I was no longer, even if I had been 10 when I saw Phantom Menace, I didn't like watching movies necessarily about people my own age. I knew people my own age. I was my own age. I liked watching movies about people that were older, even if they were just teenagers, people that were older that I could learn from or perhaps emulate, or maybe one day even be. So the Star Wars franchise, I don't think that Akira Kurosawa was, when he was making samurai movies, was thinking to himself, these are for the kids. I'm making samurai movies, movies about the Tokugawa shogunate, and I'm going to, they're about children. I don't think he ever thought that. I also don't think George Lucas ever thought he was just making a kid's film. Certainly none of the designers or anything that was, if they were making a children's film, if Star Wars was a children's movie, it would have been a much different film. It was a movie that was being made for everybody. I stand by that. I believe that. But now I see a lot of chatter in the wake of Freddie Prinze Jr. Yes, you're just mad that Star Wars hasn't grown up with you. But the thing is, it has. I go back and watch Star Wars and Empire, and I love them just as much as I loved them the first time I saw them. What happened is that the Star Wars franchise became infected by George Lucas's idea that, these were movies that are made for kids. He didn't like Empire Strikes Back. If you read Rinso's book on the making of Empire, Lucas was not a fan with what was being done, certainly what Irvin Kershner was bringing to the film, even the way it was being shot, with the reliance on master shots, which made it so Kershner, they couldn't really play with what he was doing in the edit bay. It's really interesting, really fascinating stuff. Whereas one of the things that I really objected to in Return of the Jedi was I felt that it was a very dumbed down movie. Lucas took back control of the franchise, even though Richard Marquand was directing. Lucas was like, no, you're going to do it my way. Lucas was on set when it was being made. And he's like, this movie's for the kids. I get it. I understand. But that's one of the reasons I don't like Return of the Jedi as much as I like Star Wars and Empire, because it seems clearly directed at younger members of the audience. There's not a lot of sophistication going on in Jedi, but people love it so much because, and I do too, because at the end, you do have the battle with Vader, the Emperor, and Luke, and I do find that stuff to be incredible, which is great. But having Tony Gilroy come on board, who is a very sophisticated, very adult director, even when he's writing genre material and adapting The Devil's Advocate, the novel, into maybe it's not, the novel is not called Devil's Advocate, but maybe it is. I love The Devil's Advocate. First of all, I think it's it's basically a B movie with an A-list budget, and I love it so much. It's so great. Keanu Reeves people might not say he's great in it, but I like him in it. Charlize Theron is in it. It's great. Even one of my favorite redheads is in it, who, of course, was Commodus's sister and the daughter of Caesar, Richard Harris's Caesar, in Gladiator. Love that movie. But having somebody like that come on board the Cassian Andor series is everything I want from my science fiction or space fantasy adventure. I want adults that are writing adult characters that I can believe in as an adult. That's what I want. And more than anything, I want a level of sophistication that I am not getting in my other favorite franchise from the writing. But I think it's very, very exciting, and I hope you guys do too. But the hire of Tony Gilroy, I mean, it makes sense, of course, because he obviously worked on Rogue One and indeed helped Gareth Edwards finish up the movie when they did reshoots and in the edit bay, and really stepped in and helped. And it says a lot about how Disney felt about him and how Kathleen Kennedy probably felt about him, that he was brought back to have so much responsibility for the Cassian Andor series. Well, it just makes that series go up this much higher in my estimation. It's incredible, and it's very exciting. Kenneth Colton is here. Bruh. Congrats on 250 shows. I think someone deserves the new IG-11 hot toy. Sending love from Spokane, Washington. Go Hawks. Well, as you might have guessed, I have pre-ordered the IG-11 hot toy. I think the pre-order, it was like $25 you had to put down. Can't wait to get IG-11. It's going to go right next to my IG-88 up there. No, it won't. It'll go right next to my Mandalorian. But thank you very much. I appreciate that. I can't believe we've done 250 episodes. Incredible. For 300 episodes, I've got something pretty cool planned that I've already started to put in motion, and I'll teach you. I'll tell you more about that. I mean, we're only 50 episodes away from 300, which means that's before Christmas. So I think look for the special Christmas episode of Robservations, episode 300. My God. Playing with Squirrels says, thanks for reading my letter on Capital Ship Toys. Hope to send more soon. If you ever do want to talk ships, I'm always game. Congrats on 250 episodes. Playing with Squires, as you know, your letter about capital ships and micro machines and all of that, it was one of my favorite letters I've ever read on the show. So great. Echo Base Network says, any news on chatting with Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers? Saw he super chatted John Campy and Kristen Harloff yesterday during their announcement video. Thought both sides showed class. Well, as many of you know, what's up, Geeks and Gamers? It's Jeremy here with another video. Geeks and Gamers is known as a Fandom Menace channel. I watch Jeremy. I've always, I mean, you know, for everything that Jeremy can, his point of view sometimes is diametrically opposed to my own. But again, the guy is out there on a daily basis, making videos, working, offering his opinion. And if you don't like his opinion or he pisses you off, you don't have to watch him. But you know what? Guy's got a work ethic, and he has an opinion that I think is well stated. He's well spoken. And at the end of the day, what I have said about everybody on the Fandom Menace, their approach to things might be different from mine, but we all come from the same place. We all love Star Wars. We all love Star Trek. We all love comics. We all love movies. We all love living in the post-geek singularity where we have all of this great stuff. And I think Jeremy, you know what Jeremy and I want? You know, we're both the same. We just want our entertainment to be great because we grew up with great entertainment. And I think when you see what happens is when corporate interests outweigh creative interests, we wind up not satisfied with what ends up being made. And I think we both come from that same place. So yes, I'm actually looking forward to teaming up or doing a show with Jeremy. I don't know. We were talking about it. He did text me and said we're going to set it up recently, and I would love to do that. I would love to interview Jeremy, to be honest. If we did a show together, I'd want to ask him about his fandom. Where did it come from? What did he see first? Maybe he's already done that. I don't know. And I think we could have a great rollicking discussion. Obviously, we're different generations, but it would be great. So I would love to. I can't wait to do it. I think it'd be a lot of fun. I didn't know that he super chatted Harloff and Campy. That's good for him. You know, we're all working in the same space. And look, I think there's enough room for everybody. That's what America is all about. James Bonner says, hey, Rob, just watched the latest selection in my Netflix DVD cube. James Bonner says, hey, Rob, just watched the latest selection in my Netflix DVD queue called The Hills Run Red. You mean the Italian Western from the 60s? Guessing you're quite familiar with it. Laugh out loud. Also fun watching the behind-the-scenes stuff. Cool gore fest. Well, James, I appreciate that. As many people know, 10 years ago, a movie came out called The Hills Run Red that was directed by my good friend, Dave Parker, who I've been working with for years, and I produced it. Dave and I worked for 3 years to get that movie made. It took us 2 years of developing the script. I hired Dave Scow to rewrite the script. Dave Scow, who co-wrote The Crow and wrote Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And we were working with a company called Fever Dreams that ultimately thought I was full of shit. And I said, no, we're gonna get to make this movie with Warner Brothers. Trust me. Now, it took a while, but who was correct? I was correct. But yes, so The Hills Run Red was the first Joel Silver's Dark Castle Entertainment which made like Return to House on Haunted Hill. Dark Castle was going to do a series of 10 direct-to-video films. The first was Return to House on Haunted Hill, which was a sequel to The House on Haunted Hill. And that was the first one. Ours, The Hills Run Red, was their first totally original film. Now, these were movies that were going to be budgeted in the $4 to $6 million range. And we were doing ours, and they were going to do 10 movies. And I thought, as I've thought with many things that I've done in my career, hoping they're going to go somewhere. I thought, great. I was able to flip the movie to Warner Brothers. Diane Nelson, who was then later president of DC Entertainment, who now works for Quibi. Diane Nelson greenlit the project, and Dave and I we got to stay on it. We were not replaced, and I was able to produce the film in Bulgaria. Also, the behind the scenes that you saw, there is a documentary called half-an-hour documentary called "It's Not Real Until You Shoot It: Making Hills Run Red." I took my own equipment with me to Bulgaria and shot behind the scenes and made a documentary that is on the DVD. The movie has never come out on Blu-ray yet. And while there's no official announcement to be made, if you are a fan of The Hills Run Red, and let's say you were a fan, and let's say you're interested, I did shoot a lot more material than showed up on the DVD. Warner Brothers, it's funny, Warner Brothers, here on Superman Returns, they paid me a lot of money to make a documentary on Superman Returns. And then 3 years later on my own movie, I said, hey, no one paid anything for this documentary. Can I put it on the disc? And they're like, oh, I guess so. So I made my own documentary and put it on the disc, but I'm glad you like that. I also made sure that we had an audio commentary on the DVD, which was great. So I'm glad that you liked it. Hopefully we'll be seeing The Hills Run Red on high def soon. Well, you can get the HD version, I think, on Vudu, but you can't get a physical media version of it. You can't get it on Blu-ray. But maybe if some company would be interested in doing it, we might see it in 2020. Who knows? And if we did, maybe I'm creating a bunch more special features for it. Who knows? No man can say. So thanks for that, James. Thanks for, by the way, supporting the channel. Now, okay, Pteranodon Media. Pteranodon Media is here. Pteranodon says, happy 250th to Rob, mods, and my Post-Geek Singularity crewmates. Now, I've been saying Pteranodon wrong, as I do with a lot of things. I'm hoping I've got Pteranodon correct today. I want to thank Pteranodon for supporting the channel and being here for a while. You are definitely a vibrant member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, and it's great to have you. By the way, a special shout out, my channel, the Post-Geek Singularity community, and all of you imagination connoisseurs, it would not be the same place if I didn't have my moderators, Terry, the Sheriff of Nottingham in the UK, Detective Jim, Greg Smith, and of course, Mike Bodden, the Honorable Mike Bodden, the 4 moderators. Very interesting. I mean, I didn't know Detective Jim and I didn't know Terry. I met them through this show. And we'll be bringing on more people and various commentators. There's going to be more shows on the Burnettwork, all kinds of things that are coming up. But it's been interesting. The last 10 months, this started out as an experiment. I didn't know if I was going to stick with it. I didn't know what I was going to continue doing with this channel. But really, it exists. It continues to exist because of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, you guys supporting the channel, but most of all, you being you. The fact that people, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on in this live chat right now that I have no knowledge of, because it always, you guys have made it what you've made it. I have just been it's funny being called a gatekeeper. It's so funny because I'm usually the guy standing at the gate going, hey, come on in, the party's awesome. So I've always thought that was rather amusing, but it seems like the party is going, and we get more subscribers and more people all the time, which is terrific. Lee Sandoval is here. Hey, brother, I'm going to see Jay and Silent. Hey, brother, are you going to see the Jay and Silent Bob reboot? I might. I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith, big supporter. Tomorrow night, of course, Jay and Silent Bob reboot was being shown twice. Last night was the first night, and Thursday night, tomorrow night, is the second night. Fathom Events is putting that on. You can see it at theaters near you. but then they are taking, like they did with Red State, they're taking Jay and Silent Bob Reboot on the road on a road trip, and they're going to go around the country and show the film, and I'm sure have a night with Kevin Smith. I went to the Red State showing, and it was great fun. I really liked it a lot. Dan V900 says, Tony Gilroy was brought in to save the Cassian series. Steve Weintraub said that everyone working on it was sent home since the story and scripts weren't good enough. I guess you go back to him after Rogue One. Well, I can believe that. I mean, well, there you go. And I'll tell you something. I'm sure there's going to be a lot made of that. That once again, Kathleen Kennedy is making changes midstream because they expect these things to be good, and I think it's great. I think it's great that's what you do. You know, we have too much. I don't know why there's so much great writing now, and even in something like The Boys, really well written, really smart show. And yes, they had a comic book to work off of. I understand, but it just seems to me it's so strange that with Star Trek they keep falling back into these old. Oh, I know. Let's show the origin of the Tribbles, said no one ever. I mean, you go back and then you muck around with the Tribbles. And once again, like you did with Alien, let's demystify the unknowable and make the alien just an offshoot of the experimentation of a crazy, hateful android from Earth. One of the great things about the original Alien is that it said the cosmos is unknowable. You know, there are just some things we're never going to know the answers to. We don't know why there's a xenomorph. Was it built as a weapon? Did something go awry? What happened to that space jockey? And now it's all answered. It's all demystified. And are we better off because we know that there are engineers? Are we better off because we know that Michael Fassbender as a paranoid android created the aliens? I don't think so. I think the movie Alien and the message of Alien is much better when we don't know. The same thing is true of Tribbles. Now, basically, I'd say Discovery ruined Tribbles because the whole way Tribbles are, the entire reason they're an ecological menace, is because human beings tampered with their DNA. Ugh, gosh, why does it have to be that way? Willow Yang says, happy 250th. I love Al Pacino's speech in Devil's Advocate. Who is your favorite portrayal of the devil on screen? Ooh, that's pretty good. That's a good question. You know, I really do. I love Robert. See, you got Robert De Niro playing the devil, Louis Safier in Angel Heart, which I love. By the way, I can't wait to get that 4K disc from the UK. And then you've got Al Pacino playing the devil in Devil's Advocate. By the way, both of those portrayals of the devil are terrific. I really love both. But I would say those two are probably my favorite portrayals of the devil. I really liked. I mean, I remember as a kid, I loved the devil and the Howling Man, the episode of the Twilight Zone episode, the Howling Man. But those are great. Those are probably my favorite, Angel Heart and Devil's Advocate. I mean, like you said, Willow, the speech. I got my nose down to the grindstone. I'm a fan of man. I'm a humanist. I it's so great. I love Devil's Advocate. It's great. But yes. So Corey Timmons says, hi, Rob, sending in love. Well, thank you, sir. Thanks for supporting the channel. I very much appreciate that. Again, I can't believe I am even here. Echo Base Network says, I'm going to one of the roadshow showings of Jay and Silent Bob Reboot with an actress friend of mine that is in the movie. Looking forward to meeting Kevin Smith. He's a very nice guy. I think that is a very cool thing that you are doing. This is a letter from Alain Denois. It's French. If Elizabeth was here, Elizabeth, by the way, is in film school today. She's in her film class, and she made her second film with her class. I watched her put it together. She actually edited the film herself. Pretty amazing. Interesting to watch. One major point that really irritates me about this whole Scorsese MCU saga is this. In 1988, The Last Temptation of Christ came out, and was boycotted by a bunch of religious groups, and one of them even set fire to a cinema in Paris. All of this while the movie had only been played in New York to a very small group of people, and the religious groups even refused to an open invitation to view the movie. So Scorsese's comments about the MCU, with him saying he did not even see the movies, to me is unbearably hypocritical. Is it unbearably? It probably is. I think you shouldn't necessarily weigh in and be critical of something that you haven't actually seen. But what Elaine is referring to is back in the late 80s, it was when I first moved to LA. Martin Scorsese made an adaptation of, I think it's Nikos Kazantzakis, a writer, wrote a novel called The Last Temptation of Christ, and he made the movie. Willem Dafoe plays Christ in the film. And basically in the book, the storyline is when Christ is on the cross, this is again in a nutshell, when Christ is on the cross, he's tempted basically by Satan, like, come down, come off the cross. You don't have to die for man's sins, and gives him a vision of a life he could have. But Christ says no to this last temptation and basically stays on the cross and dies for our sins. And there were a lot of people that were up in arms that Christ was being portrayed this way. Now, what was funny to me as somebody who was raised Jewish, and I'm not a Christian, but I always thought that the story, and by the way, after the movie came out, I read the book, and I still feel this way. Christ was tempted to come off the cross and not have to die. Not, being crucified couldn't have been pleasant. And if Christ was totally aware that he was the Son of God, he'd just be like, I'm just going to die and I'll be resurrected. No big deal. No, it wasn't like that. The whole point was that the character of Christ did, in fact, take on humanity's pain, did take on all of our sins. And instead of taking the easy route, the easy way out, he was crucified and died there. A horrible death. And that's the whole point of his sacrifice. And the idea that he was tempted, it was pretty tempting. And that even then he said no. From a storytelling standpoint, I'm like, well, that's somebody to definitely be admired. And I never understood why people so objected to, maybe it was because the idea that Christ would hook up with some lovely lady. I never understood that. He didn't. The whole point of the story is that even in spite of this temptation, he didn't do it. He was untemptable. You couldn't tempt the man. So I never understood why everybody was angry about that, but there were protesters, and I went and saw protesters at Universal. They were at the theaters up at City Walk. It's now City Walk, but at Universal, the entertainment complex, and it was crazy. There was a lot of protesters there. It was wacky. But I think the Martin Scorsese, and I read Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's editorial. I do think that Scorsese has a point, and I know what he's saying. He's not saying that Marvel movies are the worst things in the world, and nor is he saying people shouldn't enjoy the Marvel movies. What he really is saying, I think, metaphorically, is that he wants to see different kinds of cinema, people enjoying different kinds of cinema. And I think, obviously he was promoting his own movie, The Irishman, but he doesn't want to see our cineplexes only filled with populist entertainment. Scorsese grew up one of the best times for film. We talk about the best periods of American movies were the 1940s and the 1970s in terms of really adult fare. But in the 60s, when Scorsese was a young man, you had an incredible influx. You had Italian neorealist cinema. You had the French New Wave. Quentin Tarantino, not as old as Scorsese, but was also inspired by a lot of these films. There was a lot of movies that audiences today would just be like, what the hell is this? Jules and Jim, hugely influential on everybody from Cameron Crowe to Tarantino to Scorsese himself. The movies of Jean-Luc Godard, the films of Francois Truffaut, Antonioni's movies. These are movies that literally, I don't think many people who watch Marvel movies have the patience or the understanding of even how to watch. And before everybody gets mad, if you don't believe me, I I would implore all of you to watch the Ennui trilogy, Antonioni's Ennui trilogy, La Notte, La Ventura, and The Eclipse. Just sit down. Just sit down and try and watch those movies and get back to me and tell me what you thought. I love those films, but I think that, if you were born after a certain period of time and you've been living on a steady diet of Marvel movies, I don't even know if you're equipped. And this isn't a bad way. It'd just be like I'm not really equipped to read a lot of poetry. I wasn't instructed about poetry. I don't know enough about it to really appreciate what I'm reading. But I think movies like Antonioni's Ennui trilogy, if you're not used to that kind of cinema, you would find it very difficult to pay attention. And it's not a slight. It's just people didn't grow up with those movies now, especially if you're, younger than, say, 35. And that's not a criticism. It's just truth. Some people have. I'm not saying that, but you don't think I can go watch La Notte and La Ventura and The Eclipse? No, you can. You can. Or Last Year at Marienbad or something like that. You can. Everybody can watch them. The question is, what will you get out of them? Will you be able to pay attention? And it's because, people, if you don't know, it's just like people who say they don't like classical music or I don't like country. Well, have you ever really listened to country? If you sit down and you make a concerted effort, like I'm going to go, I remember saying I didn't like country very much. And then I heard a Steve Earle and the Dukes record. I'm like, wow, I was told it was country. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like more of a swampy, I don't know, bluegrassy, but it was country too. I mean, there's something, you can always find something to like. But I think Martin Scorsese would like it if we had more of a well-rounded cinematic diet. And, he's also trying to drum up some interest for The Irishman, let's face it. Dean Mikitich is here. Dean says, hey, Rob, with your knowledge of films and TV, I'm hoping that you or a member of the Post-Geek Singularity can help me out. I am on the lookout for what I think is a film, but could have been a TV movie. I don't know who starred in it or what it is called. Not very helpful, I know. This film is something I saw in the early 90s on British TV and missed the first few minutes, so I missed the name of it. From what I remember, the story was about an inventor that was hard on his luck, about to lose his home or something like that. All legal avenues to get money to save his home is closed to him, and he decided to rob a bank using his inventions. Oh, that sounds great. Now, this is the bit that sticks out in my memory. The getaway car was a bright yellow car and another of his inventions. As he's having trouble losing the police, he uses the special feature of the car. A steering wheel comes out of the glove compartment and the car splits down the middle for him, and I think his wife, to get away. I also think the film could have come from Australia or New Zealand, but I'm not 100% sure, and therefore something like that is not well known here in the UK. Like I said, not a lot of information to be helpful, but in the words of Princess Leia, help me, Rob, in the Post-Geek Singularity. You're my only hope. Kind regards, Dean M. P.S. You don't need to read this aloud, but you are getting my surname right. So there you go. I don't know, people. Do you know? I have not seen this movie myself. It does not ring a bell. But if you know what it is, please help Mr. Mikitich out because he needs it. James Ito is here. James says, hey, Rob, or James Ito sent me a letter. So I just watched the second trailer for The Lady and the Tramp. And I must say, it looks like an enjoyable family film. Disney's first straight-to-streaming animated remake on Disney Plus, and the first of many straight-to-streaming Disney films. The sets and costume design look convincing, and the visual effects are quite good, though it be of only trailer quality. I like the voice acting cast they have, including Tessa Thompson, Justin Theroux, and Sam Elliott. I would prefer professional voice actors, but I understand that the studio needs to have a star power when it comes to major productions like this, but I digress. This will definitely be on the playlist for me and the kids to watch on a Friday night while devouring popcorn and Twinkies. The couple who play the ladies' owners, Jim Deere and Darling, Thomas Mann and Kiersey Clemens, are a mixed-race couple who fall in love, get married, have a child, which plays a vital part of the film's plot, with Lady questioning her role in the household. As the product of a mixed-race relationship myself, being half Japanese, or as I like to say, half awesome, I feel like I need to address something that has been bothering me since I saw this trailer. I have not seen this film, so the concerns I have for this movie are based off of historical facts and what the trailer is hinting at, so let's begin. A mixed marriage between a white man and a black woman would have been very tricky and a gruesome experience in 1909, which is when this film takes place. In fact, the town where the story is based is Marceline, Missouri, Walt Disney's hometown outside Kansas City. Missouri has had a rough history concerning slavery and civil rights. When Missouri was up for statehood, there was a possibility that Missouri could have been a free state. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 derailed that option as to keep a balance of representation within the U.S. Senate. In the end, Missouri became a slave state, and at the same time, Maine became a free state as it was secluded in the North Atlantic coast. The Civil War, of course, happened, then came reunification, and for the next 100 years, the black population had to endure an unbalanced system that deprived them of civil rights, particularly in the South, Missouri. One of these laws that suppressed black people and marriage alike was Missouri's anti-miscegenation law, a law that restricted a black person from marrying a white person, with the punishment being at least 2 years in prison and hard labor. This law got sustained by the Supreme Court as a state law in 1883 and did not conflict with the 14th Amendment. Anti-miscegenation was never a federal law. Only in 1967, when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Richard and Mildred Loving in their case against Virginia to marry, was anti-miscegenation classified as being unconstitutional. This is amazing. This is in my lifetime. My lifetime. This ruling was 58 years after the events of Lady and the Tramp. The reason why I threw all these facts at you, Rob, is that I'm concerned Disney is throwing out historical accuracy for the sake of contemporary acceptance. It would be like if a Disney film followed a Japanese-American family in San Francisco during World War II, and they don't get sent to a relocation camp, and them avoiding relocation or Japanese prejudices are never brought up. My own grandparents had to sell everything they had and left the Bay Area to avoid the internment camps, hence how my dad was born in Utah and not California. I still need to visit Topaz. Another movie, this is very interesting. Another movie that I want to bring up to support my concerns is a film that came out last year that I quite like and nearly love, Overlord, from 2018, about American troops fighting Nazi zombies the day after D-Day in occupied France. The film definitely draws me into the story and gets me to care about the people fighting together for a better cause, with lots of pleasurable action and violence. The one thing that takes me out of the movie is that the lead character, Private Boyce, Jovian Adepo, is black. This is not a racist comment, but one about historical accuracy. Combat units in the U.S. Army and the 101st Airborne were not mixed during the war. It was a segregated military until President Truman signed Executive Order 9981 in 1948. But the filmmakers and writers ignore this as to incorporate more diversity in their film. I would be more accepting of this if the story mentions briefly why a parachuting unit is racially mixed for a drop. An experiment, skills needed, or just by chance? Who knows? I'm upset that they're there and they treat it as normal. I'm always advocating diversity in film and television. I'm glad to see so much diversity today in my content. Diversity is very prevalent in science fiction, fantasy, and comic book films. You can literally write anything in today's social life, no matter what race they are. But changing social history is not what I'm a fan of. One of the oldest films depicting a married mixed-race couple where a white man marries a Cherokee woman is Cimarron, all the way back to 1931, which was not overseen by the Hays Code. Sabra, who is the lead female, played by Irene Dunn, is against it, but then accepts it years later. I think the film is better for it to show that we all have a degree of prejudice. I'm happy that Lady and the Tramp has a mixed marriage, but I'm willing to bet that the movie will not mention anything about Missouri's anti-miscegenation law. They live their marriage openly in the middle of 1909's Missouri, and everyone treats it as normal. Strange that my letter is about third-tier cast members and not of the dogs. Children are smarter than what we give them credit for. They're capable of seeing the hardships that certain people faced in the past and know that it isn't right. Racism isn't instinct, it's taught. Thank you, Rob, for reading, and I love to hear your thoughts. Best, James Ito. Well, first of all, fantastic letter. And I agree with you 100%. I do not like this idea that we want to scrub and change history in our popular entertainment because now diversity is the order of the day. It wasn't. We have a horrible history of racism. And strangely enough, the new Watchmen TV series is all about white supremacy and racism. And I'm with you. Maybe they decided to make a mixed race couple, a Japanese couple, I don't know, to make up for the the Siamese cat song. Although that's strange because that just lumps all Asian peoples into one thing. It's very, very, very odd. I mean, it's look, we don't have a good good track record in terms of race in this country. And like you pointed out, the idea of racism in this country, while it's still here, it's getting better every day. Kids are certainly growing up in a far more diverse environment. I remember watching, don't ask me why. I went and saw, I believe it was Step Up 2, The Streets. And one of the things that really struck me about Step Up to the Streets is like the good dance troupe, the good dance kids were an ethnically mixed group. And like the bad guys were less diverse, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's like, okay, the Rainbow Coalition is here to save the world. But yeah, when you're dealing with historical accuracy, I think it's strange. I mean, but then you read articles on things like multiversity when you make a historical epic and someone says, this is where all the people of color here. Well, if there aren't any, by choosing to tell the story, it's not inherently racist because there didn't happen to be any different people in that part of the world. I mean, Lord of the Rings has frequently been criticized, especially the movies, because there aren't a lot of people of color. Well, because of when it was set in the Middle Earth, I mean, not that Middle Earth was a real place, but it was a stand-in for England, basically. And that was just the way it was written. And I find it's so interesting now. Everybody's so quick to point the finger and they make race the first thing. And look, again, like I say with your universe, don't put your political agenda before your characters and your story. I mean, it's very funny. I've never watched, like when I was watching blaxploitation films as a kid, or when I watched New Jack City, I never thought to myself, well, maybe I did that. Ooh, Judd Nelson's like the token white dude in this movie. It's such a weird thing. I mean, I just like movies about people. When you watch movies like Lethal Weapon, I get that Murtaugh was a black guy and Riggs was a white dude, but it wasn't about their racial differences. I mean, they brought racism into Lethal Weapon too. You're black. I mean, that whole scene with Joe Pesci is very funny, talking about what happened and all of that. But the story of Lethal Weapon was not one necessarily of racial divide. It was basically the story of how two cops are different kinds of people. And yeah, you put race there. But again, I thought it was really interesting how Lethal Weapon showed a very functional and sometimes dysfunctional, but mostly functional mom and dad family. The Murtaugh family was a very loving family. And I thought it was interesting. I don't know if Lethal Weapon, the Murtaugh family, was written as being black. I have no idea if that was originally done. Just like Morgan Freeman's character in Shawshank Redemption was not originally a black man. He was a white dude. And how do they address it? Why do they call you red? Maybe it's because I'm Irish. I mean, the way they did that, it was great. And to me, the best kind of representation is when you're showing people of various ethnicities or different nationalities, and it's matter of fact, like Captain Sisko being captain of Deep Space Nine, or commander eventually, but then captain. That's the best kind of representation, when it's just there. Once you turn it into a political issue, then it's like, oh, I get it. We're being preached to. And immediately you turn off the audience. But yeah, that's very, very interesting. Look, like you said, why bother showing? I get it. We have to make a movie that's diverse because World War II, we had the Tuskegee Airmen. Our airmen were segregated. It's crazy. And I think your letter is well taken. I think that it's important to have, or at least a semblance of historical accuracy. I mean, I'm sure someone could say, well, there weren't really zombies in Nazi-controlled or occupied France either. I mean, come on. But your point is well taken. And I think I think you're right about that. I don't think that there's anything wrong to throw in some historical accuracy, because it would trump historical accuracy, trumps, so to speak, trumps questions of modern day questions of diversity and things like that. Mark C is here. Mark C says Feige's new position replaces longtime Chief Creative Officer Joe Quesada. I see this as a positive. Hopefully, Kevin can right the ship in the areas of Marvel that's not the movies. Look, I hope so. Like I said, Hickman's run on X-Men, Powers of X and House of Powers of X and House of 10 has been phenomenal, and I want to see more of that. Chris Provoto says, I nominate Star Wars Theory for a YouTube roundtable with Campia, Jeremy, Thor Skywalker, yourself, and others for a civil debate live stream on Star Wars. Man, I would love to see that. Yeah, I mean, I don't see as there's any reason. Here, for me, I think one of the things that I offer the YouTube pundit space that a lot of people can't say is I have, regardless of what some people think, I have worked in the entertainment business, in various aspects of the entertainment business, since 1989. And I did begin my working at Warner Brothers for the senior vice president of physical production after I worked on New Line's Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. So, and I've produced films and I've been through the Hollywood ringer. So I can hopefully offer a perspective that a lot of YouTube pundits can't. It's very funny. A lot of people think they know a lot more than they do, or they know more than they allow themselves to know. And it's interesting when I watch a lot of this, a lot of the realities of the entertainment business are not taken into consideration when these conversations are had. But Chris, I would totally do that. I think that would be a lot of fun. Now, I know, when I speak, since you brought it up, people have asked me, oh my God, Christian Harloff and John predate me. I mean, they worked together. When I first met John, Christian was already at Collider, and it was AMC back then, but was already there. And for them to do a show, for Christian to go off on his own, it only makes sense. I mean, John's got almost 200,000 subscribers, although I will say he has grown substantially since I've been involved with him. But I'm a guest on his show, and him and Christian used to do a show together. So for them to do new shows together, it only makes sense. And the Schmoes have 300,000 subscribers. If they invite me to do a show, great. If they don't, that's great too. It's their show. It's up to them. I mean, would I like to benefit? Hopefully somebody would hear me say something they liked, and it would be reflective on my own subscriber base. Sure. I mean, I would love that. I think that would be great. But my subscriber base has been slowly inching towards I'm hoping to hit 15,000 by the end of this month, which would be great. I mean, it's what I'm trying to do is I see this community, not just me sitting here. I want to expand the Burnettwork into a network and have other people, other voices, and other have a place where we have a built-in community, having new creators, for instance, and all of my subscribers can be, in fact, used by other people, that we're building a community, or at least get eyes on other people's points of view. I would like to see more women in this punditry space, and that's why Allie State, I'm bringing her on to become my first columnist on my website. I mean, technically you could say Willow Yang. I would say Willow has become a columnist, and I'm actually going to have a graphic made for Willow Talk. But Allie State, I asked her if she was interested in doing something, and she pitched me this idea, the Feminerd Gaze. And I'm like, oh, I'm sold. And she told me her first article, she wrote a small piece on Batman, the animated series. And I would like to see that. And I'd like to see diversify. And I think that would be a lot more. I think that would be a lot more. It'll be beneficial. We'll see as I grow the channel. I mean, the more support I get, both in terms of subscribers and monetary support and all those things, it allows you to build the channel. So I want to see more of that happen. But it would be great to. I think Jeremy was with Gary Beekler at the New York City Comic Con, and I have to say, I liked seeing them in the frame together. I liked seeing Gary and Jeremy walking around New York City, going to see a movie together or whatever. I thought that was cool. I mean, I think it's cool that we have a community of people that know each other and that they meet in the wild. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's great. I'd love to sit down and do that. I think we should have I'll tell you one thing, we could promote the hell out of it, and what would really be interesting is if somehow we could stream it to all of our channels simultaneously. So if you were a Jeremy viewer, if you're a Geeks and Gamers guy or girl, or you're a John Campia guy or girl, or a Christian Harloff guy or girl, or a Rob Burnett guy or girl, you could watch, and it would be our perspective or something. And each person, I don't know how it would work, but I think it could be pretty cool. It'd be really cool. If it would cost a lot of money to do something like that, but I think it'd be neat to do it. Maybe have an event here in LA. I don't know. That'd be kind of neat. Lee Sandoval says, if you made a Batman movie, what would you make it about? You know what? I think here's if I made a Batman movie, it would have to be about a pivotal moment in Batman's life where he questions everything that he's doing. And there would be a period of time where, and I don't know what it would be. So here's my problem, that whoever Batman's up against, Batman's going to win. But one of the things that I really loved about the way The Dark Knight ended was Batman had to, in order to preserve the myth of Harvey Dent, that Harvey Dent died a good man, he had to take it upon himself. He had to take the blame and ride off into the sunset. And he couldn't be, as we found out in Dark Knight Rises, he couldn't be Batman for 8 years. I thought that was a great choice. And I would do something along those lines, maybe a Court of Owls-esque story where a lot of truths and things that Batman took to be self-evident turned out not to be true. I really love the Court of Owls storyline, but you could change it, and you find out that Batman's life is not necessarily predicated on a lie, and I certainly wouldn't make Thomas Wayne a bad person, but maybe something early on that happened in Batman's career, something where you could see that story. You could see a person, something went down that he thought was one way and it really was some other way, and he finds out later in life and it comes to bite him in the ass. Something like that. I don't know. I would certainly use some of his rogues gallery. I don't know who. Ra's al Ghul is somebody I've always liked, but maybe make it about Talia al Ghul. I don't know. I don't think she was, if that was truly supposed to be Talia. I know it is, but Marianne Cotillard, I love her so much, but was she really used correctly in Batman or The Dark Knight Rises? I don't know, but something along those lines yesterday. Alan Sachs says, missed my super chat yesterday. I did. I apologize. Xbox has had a 4K Blu-ray for years now. PlayStation 4 hasn't. Sony was top of the line in the 1980s, but now is low end. Happy 250th. Yeah, I keep hearing that, but you know what? I mean, I love PlayStation, but yes, I know they've had a Blu-ray, but the fact that Sony is going to be incorporating it into PlayStation 5 means that 4K Blu-ray is going to last at least another decade. So physical media will be around for at least that time, which is good. Terry Cooper says, happy 250th to Post Geeks and Mods. I'm going to go for it and launch a Kickstarter for my animated feature. You know, the one in the new year. Well, Terry Cooper, I would say good for you. You got to do that. If not now, if not you, who? If not now, when? I'm a firm believer in making that stuff happen. This next letter comes from Garth. Robert, great episode today. I totally agree that one should watch their favorite movie in a theater. It has a greater impact than watching it on your 65 to 70-inch TV, even with the best sound in your home. However, the other topic I need to raise is that in your country, there is no censorship with regards to all movies other than the rating stamp on it, and you can decide whether it is an adult affair or a movie you can watch with your kids. Basically, your movie shown in theaters and on streaming goes pretty uncensored. However, for most of your films that you imported for Asian countries, such as in Singapore, the film usually has been reviewed, and in Asia, nudity and violence in film is further toned down, and the film we get are usually edited for general consumption and is nowhere near 100% as the film you saw. Obviously, the Disney stuff usually gets by without any censorship. In reality, we don't have much incentive to really view anything on the big screen. In addition, even the Blu-rays we get are also censored in some way or another. All we do is to get only the US release version of a Blu-ray for any film. That's why my shift that's why my shift in view of importance. As long as the story is told is good in the film, it does not matter whether you watch it on an old VHS quality DVD or Blu-ray. The story transcends from screen to your mind. That's all that matters. My favorite films that I enjoyed watching on the big screen are Superman, the movie, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, the 007 films of Roger Moore and Timothy Dalton, and the Back to the Future trilogy. I even watched Star Trek the Motion Picture on its first release in theaters. Good man. I was blown away by Terminator 1 and 2. The last recent film I watched in theaters was Tron Legacy in 3D. That's cool. That's interesting. That was a while ago, man. All were great. I've also gone through all the phases of the formats, from VHS, Laserdisc, DVDs, and Blu-ray. Now I just view content on my HBO, Netflix, and YouTube episodes. I enjoy all the movies that have been released in the past 40 years. In the end, it is the story that matters. Coming back to your defense for Netflix, the way that there's no marketing for any of their films is actually a clever move. If there's no advanced screenings, the film cannot be bad-mouthed until its official release, and rely on word of mouth for those who view the film as a much better way of promoting the film. If the film is good, it'll be good. Netflix, rather than spend every cent of the budget to get the films made instead of promoting those films. Anyway, you can watch Netflix in the comfort of your home, anytime, anywhere. Great show. Keep it up. Best regards, Garth. I wonder what country that you are in, sir. What Asian country are you in? Which is interesting. You forget that there is, of course, censorship. I guess because you do mention Singapore, that you might be in Singapore. I didn't know if that's the case. I didn't know Singapore censored movies. But I mean, I've always wanted to go to Singapore. I've admired everything I've ever read about it, and I'd certainly like to check out Singapore. Singapore is a city-state, basically, isn't it? I'd love to go. But that's a good point. You have a lot of good points to make, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. The censorship issue is problematic, though. It's interesting considering, I love the films of John Woo, and those are so blood-soaked. I can't imagine. I'd never really considered that they might be edited somewhere in China. Interesting. See, food for thought. It's you take it for granted. Things like not having your movies censored, you just take that for granted. It is amazing. Mark C says, how about a Batman movie where Batman is broken? Everyone forgets Batman the Cult. I love Batman the Cult. Batman the Cult was a prestige format series. I want to say, did Kelly Jones draw that? It was hang on, it was Jim Starlin. Let's see. Batman the Cult. Batman the Cult was published by DC Comics, prestige format, in 1988. Oh, it's Bernie Wrightson. Well, yeah, of course it was Bernie Wrightson. Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson. It wasn't Kelly Jones, but I was going in the right direction. The late great Bernie Wrightson. Yes, Batman the Cult. I have mint condition copies of all those. Yes, Deacon Blackfire. Oh, now you make me want to go back and read that. I got to dig those out. I love that. Yes, Batman should be broken. That's kind of what I meant, but I was thinking more emotionally. But yes, in the Cult, Batman is a broken man. The Cult's really good. I don't have a hardcover of that. Was that ever released in hardcover? That's a good question. I need to know. I want to know. Let's see. This next letter, it comes from Adam Blue. Hey, Rob, I want to share 2 Star Wars topics that have been on my mind lately. One is a new thought on how the Rise of Skywalker may end and how it relates to the title. And the other is my ideas from an Obi-Wan script I wrote. Uh-oh. Even though I maintain the positive outlook that I will write and direct a Star Wars story in the future, I wanted to share this story with the members of the Post-Geek Singularity since it has now been confirmed an Obi-Wan story is in the works. For the Obi-Wan script, if you've seen recent news, it's been confirmed to be written by the writer of Drive, Hossein Amini. When I started my Obi-Wan script last year, I purposely took from Drive, which I now see as an affirmation that I'm on the right headspace for this story. The movie would be set shortly after Revenge of the Sith. We see Obi-Wan living in poverty, using the Force out of laziness and drinking. He always obsessively staring at Anakin's lightsaber. Yoda tells him to keep low, but Obi-Wan feels he needs to right his wrong of losing his brother to the dark side. Obi-Wan still communicates with Qui-Gon. It's advice, but confusing advice, which is supposed to take the viewer on a journey with Obi-Wan as he rediscovers himself. He's arrogant and dismissive, but by A New Hope, we have a happy old man. The first act sees recon troopers scouting his homestead, but he swiftly takes them out, which helps set up the idea that any attempts of the Empire to find Obi-Wan on Tatooine is hopeless. Obi-Wan is still that cunning. We see it turn into a day in the life with Obi-Wan riding a stolen Imperial speeder into Mos Eisley. He abandons it, and in the background, we immediately see Jawas run over and dismantle it. This is part of the world. This is part of the world building. Obi-Wan goes to buy a new robe, but doesn't have enough credits. He considers using a mind trick, but thinks that as he sees a group of children run by that look like slaves, it reminds him of Anakin. The main interaction of the story is to show Obi-Wan befriend a slave child and fall for the child's mother, but Obi-Wan stays strong and doesn't act on it. Similar to what we see with Ryan Gosling's character in Drive, near the end, Obi-Wan helps free the slave mother and child and gets them off-world to Alderaan. For those familiar with A New Hope, it may seem unsettling. There would be a Force vision encounter with Vader where Obi-Wan wakes up when Vader slices through him horizontally. Other details would be how he got his name Ben, using it when taking jobs from a group of Jabba's men. This keeps Obi-Wan from directly communicating with Jabba, but these jobs are related to Vader's requests of Jabba, and we see the two work together in the comics. This allows Obi-Wan to create the Ben moniker and remain mysterious, yet be drip-fed information on Vader and the Empire based on small jobs he takes. Those jobs ending up going south for Jabba's men to meet a greater goal for Obi-Wan. Anyway, there's a bit more to it, but I wanted to share my ideas since I very much care for the character and the universe, and maybe other imagination connoisseurs will feel as excited as I am. As for the Rise of Skywalker, I believe this refers to Anakin somehow coming back to destroy Palpatine. With Revenge of the Sith and Revenge of the Jedi, these names refer to the relationship between Palpatine and Anakin, so I believe the same will be true of Episode 9. Thanks for reading. Interesting. You know, I think what I want to see is for the Obi-Wan movie, I want to see a galaxy hopping story of redemption for Obi-Wan, where he has to go do something, help people, maybe somebody from his past. And I would like to see it multiple planets. I want to see it epic. I want to see an epic Jedi quest storyline, you know, kind of like, I like your idea of slaves and kids, and make it like Lone Wolf and Cub, or if you know it as Shogun Assassin. I would love to see Shogun Assassin set in the Star Wars universe with Obi-Wan Kenobi or something along those lines. But all good ideas. Yeah, it'll be curious. I mean, Hayden Christensen and Ian McDermott appearing together at conventions. You know, it makes sense, I guess. Force Ghosts coming back. Who knows? We shall see. I can't wait. I mean, I do hope Rise of Skywalker is great. I want it to stick the landing. Who knows? We're going to see a trailer, on Monday? Are we seeing a trailer on Monday on the 21st? Maybe. For Monday Night Football, hopefully. Hard to say. We shall see. I want to thank you for writing the letter. I like your letters. You write in quite often. And I think that's good. So, yeah, that's exciting. We'll see. This next letter comes from Garon Gillum. Hail, Imperator of Imagination, Praetor of Pop Culture, and Council of Cinema. I want to talk about Star Wars, which is odd because Star Wars is one of the things that I'm the least excited about right now. Laugh out loud. That being said, the Freddie Prinze Jr. rant got me thinking about what was special about Star Wars, in my own opinion. It was only much later, after the original trilogy, that I heard George Lucas talk about mythology being an inspiration for Star Wars, but once I did, it made complete sense to me. You see, there was a feeling I had when I first saw Star Wars, a feeling that I have to this day when I watched the film, that I probably couldn't describe as a kid, which I now recognize as being drawn into a mythic story, being enveloped by something bigger than the story itself, a feeling of connectivity to something beyond what was happening right there on screen. Even now, when I know what happened in the prequels, when Obi-Wan talks about the Clone Wars and Anakin and the Jedi Knights, when those two meet again on the Death Star, I am not thinking about the prequels. I'm thinking about what I imagined that first time as a kid. Almost a nostalgic feeling for a time when the fictional history of the film, of knights wielding these cool sword-like energy weapons, desperate battles, and epic adventures. Most importantly, in my imagination, that past, only 20 years chronologically, looked much different than the present day of the film. It was this epic, mythic past. I believe that George really accomplished what he set out to do with Star Wars, and why it doesn't bother me that he and Freddie Prinze say the film is for children. I would just add children of all ages. Anyway, this is why I personally believe that making the prequels at all was a mistake and that they were bound to disappoint. By showing us a detailed description or depiction of Star Wars past that was, for the most part, the same environment and the same technological level beyond superficial aspects, it pulled the veil away from that sense of myth that was created by Star Wars about its own fictional past. For me, what made the original trilogy so unique was its complete embrace of the mythic storytelling, the conflict of good and evil, and ultimately redemption. In my opinion, every subsequent film has failed to achieve that, with the exception of Revenge of the Sith, specifically and only the interaction of Anakin and Palpatine and the scenes of his turn to the dark side, which I thought were quite good. I found the scene when Anakin is looking out across Coruscant and he makes the decision that will seal his destiny, a moment signified by his shedding a tear, to be very moving. I really do think that Disney needs to recapture the mythic qualities of the original trilogy to make Star Wars awesome again. So what do you and the rest of the imagination connoisseurs think? Best, Garen Gillam. Well, Garen, that's a great letter. I think, what's really interesting about a lot of our science fiction franchises, and one of the things I loved about what happened with Star Trek from the time I was a kid, is when you would get a glimpse of the past, like in the Menagerie in the first season of the original series, it was different enough that it felt like, oh, the technology and the costumes, everything seemed, of course, the laser pistols as opposed to phasers, even though it was 11 years, little over a decade difference, there were changes made, technological changes. And in a technologically advanced society, you would think that those changes would be made. And that was very cool. And as Star Wars moved ahead, even with the animated series and then to the motion picture and then to the feature films and then to the next generation, Star Trek was constantly moving forward and showing this technological evolution. And contrary to what I'm sure the Discovery writers are thinking, we did see glimpses of almost 1,000 years in the future. There were peppered throughout the show. I hope people are paying attention to that. But Star Trek was always moving forward. And I liked the fact that we didn't go back. I mean, yeah, Enterprise, of course, being this prequel, and Enterprise wasn't really that interesting. It was just yet another Star Trek show on a ship until the fourth season, when you got to see specific things about the Star Trek universe that were interesting. And I do feel like what you said, the past in Star Wars just felt like we're just watching more of the same. And I think you're right. And it wasn't that long ago. I mean, I think about it. Think about now. Like, it's 2019. I think back 20 years ago to 1999. My life was not much different than it is right now. I'm lucky, aside from my eyesight, which is going a little blurry. I feel good. I feel pretty much the same, and I'm certainly interested in the same stuff. We have better home theater. 20 years ago, I went to the Warner Brothers lot to see The Matrix, which I had no expectations of, and now 20 years later we're getting The Matrix 4, and I don't know if I have any expectations for that now either. No, I do. I mean, I think the Matrix sequels have actually aged better, if only because they're kind of bonkers, so they're interesting. And I'm a Jupiter ascending apologist. What does that say about me? But yeah, I agree with you. I think that it was very interesting not seeing the Clone Wars depicted, but because the Star Wars became such a phenomenon, every word that was ever uttered in the script, the bounty hunter, we ran into an Ord Mandel, changed my mind, whatever. Everything had to be explored, and let's go back into the past. And I kind of thought that was a mistake. I think George Lucas could have actually told the prequel story about watching the danger. I mean, wouldn't it have been interesting if the prequel trilogy took place after Return of the Jedi? And what you saw was the descent of the New Republic into what happens with the First Order. And that was the danger. I mean, the First Order started as some kind of pro-Republic militia that got corrupted by the dark side. That was, of course, we know it was always there. Could have been interesting. I don't know. But I think you're right. I mean, this idea to go back and show us the past of everything. It's like we have to go, let's go. We'll do Caprica and show the rise of the Cylons. And why? I know it's because it's harder to take something forward than it is to go back, because back you're filling in the lines, but it's harder to create something new from whole cloth. At least that's the way I've always thought about it. But yeah, that's good letter. A lot of good Star Wars thoughts today. Very much appreciated the Star Wars thoughts, which is always good. This letter comes from Amir B. Hi, Rob. After seeing the actual video of Martin Scorsese's comments, I'd like to offer a different perspective on Marty's comments regarding Marvel movies. Some might say in his defense, but I'd like to see it as clarifying them based on context. My apologies if you have covered this perspective or the video in its entirety. No. Previously on your show, as I haven't had a chance to watch Robservations this week. I haven't seen the video. We've talked about it, but I haven't seen the actual video. In the last week, I've seen the outrage over Marty's comments. People calling him an idiot, others calling his comments idiotic, others mock him as Lord Scorsese, not to mention the myriad of online headlines about him attacking the MCU that sure gets those ad revenues. Initially, for me, his comments seemed harsh, but nothing to get my blood boiling and starting yelling for Irishman boycott. As a matter of fact, I already got my tickets to see it in the cinema next month, but I digress. For heaven's sake, the dude is a legend and probably the only director besides Nolan working today that doesn't have an average film, at least in my opinion. Everything he touches is at least good, very good. As I mentioned initially, I saw the video of him making those comments. A reporter asked him what Marty thinks about a changing landscape and the fact that the movie The Irishman is a good collaboration between TV and the internet, referring to Netflix, with films. And she asks, do we need to redefine cinema? Marty then goes on a 4-minute reply in which he keeps saying that the industry is always evolving with VR movies, streaming services, but emphasizes the communal experience of movie theaters. At one point, he said, when shopping for Irishman, we realized there's no room for us because of a variety of reasons, including financials. He continues the discussion. At one point, he goes on to say that for a long time, he thought long-form TV is cinema, but now he believes that it is not. However, here's the key thing he says. He says that we should preserve the singular experience of experiencing the picture with an audience. After this, he mentions the comments that we have heard for a million times online. Wow, I didn't know that. That actually does change things. Here's my takeaway from the actual video and not the online excerpts. 1, Scorsese believes cinema is the singular experience of experiencing the picture with an audience. That's why he doesn't consider long-form TV as cinema as well. In his talk, I believe you can see why he brought up Marvel again. He was discussing how he doesn't think long-form TV is not cinema and used theme park movies such as the MCU as another example that he doesn't think that is cinema. Frankly, I think there's a lot that Marty doesn't consider cinema. Where's the outrage over them? The MCU is just one of them and most definitely the most popular. I say this because he wasn't outright attacking the MCU. He was using them as another example that doesn't fit his definition of a singular experience of moviegoing. I see what he means because they are episodic. And he did this in the last 20 seconds of a 4-minute answer. So I think that he didn't call MCU movies cinema for the same reason he didn't call long-form TV cinema, because it seems like an episodic narrative and not a singular one. Well, this changes things, doesn't it? That's why he even says, I don't know what they are. This is funny because we always joke about how the MCU is like one long dramatic TV show on the big screens. Overall, again, I think his comments were blown out of proportion. He didn't start bashing the MCU for minutes straight. He didn't put down MCU films and put his film up. He simply gave his opinion on a question and used the MCU as an example in the most civil manner. He's a traditionalist with a strong set of beliefs, and if you know anyone in that age, their beliefs are hard to change. I completely disagree with his comments that his comments are narrow-minded. We don't think he is narrow-minded. I don't think he's narrow-minded at all. He kept talking about how cinema is evolving and we'll see where it goes in the future. He just feels that about some movies that he labels theme park movies, and he has every right to have an opinion. Agree or disagree, some things are for sure. His comments don't stop the MCU and sure as hell don't stop studios from making this kind of movie. Maybe I'm way off in my analysis, but I just wanted to share these thoughts. Thank you, Rob, for all that you do. Cheers. Wow, okay. Amir, I want to thank you for writing in. That's interesting. I didn't know that because I've only read these articles about what he said. And it's, see, now that I know that he's contextualizing the fact that streaming shows are not cinema because they're long form storytelling. Same with the MCU. I think individually, look, if you watch a movie like Iron Man is a movie that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I think that it's unfair to characterize just because you have an ongoing narrative. I mean, were serials with like the Flash Gordon serials or the Adventures of Captain Marvel serials, were those not cinema either? You know, back in the 40s or something? Maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe it's true that they weren't. I don't necessarily, I don't know. I don't know what he would think about that, but it is indeed interesting. That is an interesting take. He's not wrong. I mean, the fact that the MCU are 23 movies that form up the Infinity Saga, that's never been done before. Look, it is cinema. And one of the great things about the MCU movies is I made it a point to see all those movies opening night with a crowd, and it was a great communal experience. And it represents to me, like when I was sitting next to Nikki Griffin and we saw the Avengers movie, it was so good. It was such a great experience. Everybody was so excited. And when we saw that, the first Avengers movie, everybody loved it. It was so much fun. And when I saw Infinity War with John Schnepp at a screening, all of the LA geek community, all the film pundits, all the reviewers were all at the El Capitan Cinema in the morning watching that movie. I mean, it was glorious. It was such a fun time at the cinema. And I would not take that away from anyone. So I understand what Marty's saying about that. That's interesting because I'd have to rethink everything I've thought about what he said now. But Amir, thanks for writing in. That was great. That's a great letter. And thank you for pointing that out. Now I'm going to have to watch his entire response. Factual Opinion says, I was 5 days old when TNG's A Fistful of Datas aired. Wow. That's extraordinary. But you know, what would that make you? You're 30 now? No, you're not quite 30. Pretty good. Hey, dogs are barking. Anyway, Factual Opinion, I want to know, being that you use Dr. Manhattan's symbol as your Avi, are you going to be watching the Watchmen TV show? Is that happening? I'd be very curious to hear. I mean, I'm going to watch it, even though I'm not going to lie, I have my knives sharpened. Well, listen, everyone. Now that we got the landscapers are here, I don't even think they're our landscapers. I think they're other people's landscapers. But I'm going to bring this chat number 250 Robservations 250. I'm going to bring Robservations to an end today. I'm going to be live on the John Campea show at 3:00. We're bringing back the Weekly Hero. The Weekly Hero is coming back, ladies and gentlemen, today at 3:00. I've got a great figure to show. Very excited. It's a third-party figure. It's not a hot toy. Very excited about it. Anyway, I'll be back at 3:00 live. I invite you all to come back. Thanks for being loyal supporters of this, the Post-Geek Singularity. You imagination connoisseurs, you're all amazing. I want to thank you for supporting the channel. Going to the website, please go to the website, theburnettwork.net. A lot of interactivity happening there. Going to be a new column there. Ali states the Feminerd Gaze dropping soon. And I just want to thank you all for being the great people that you are. I want to thank my moderators, Terry, the Sheriff of Nottingham in the UK, Detective Jim, Greg Smith, who's building a 1-to-1 scale land speeder, of course, for the Emerald City Comic Con. Maybe I'll be able to go to the Emerald City Comic Con. Maybe I should ask to have like a panel. I don't know. And then, of course, the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden in Riverdale, Iowa. Remember, he's in the midst. He's fighting for his mayoral life, ladies and gentlemen. They're going back to the polls in November to see if our own Mike Bodden will, in fact, get reelected. He's going up against a housewife. It's true. That's what happens in Middle America. Those political battles are being fought locally, but they resonate globally, especially if you watch Robservations. Anyway, I want to thank all of you. And what do I always say? I say, remember, no matter where you go, no matter where you are, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, from me, from Gilbert, from Tallulah, from everybody, I bid you all, I hope you all have a better day, and I will see you in an hour and a half on John Campia's channel for the relaunch of The Weekly Hero.